In my last video, I talked about sort of stims and tics and little differences in my presentation and my behavior in person that sort of give away my autism. Many different things could go through their mind, even subconsciously. I'd like to point out something that I didn't in the last video, and that is that another thing that has happened to me a lot, and I know has happened to other Asperger girls, is that this behavior and idiosyncratic speech and maybe even childlike speech or simple speech or a childlike tone is mistaken for stupidity and for ditziness. I've actually had that one a lot too, and I would like to point out something fairly significant. It depends on where I'm at. Like, I will have certain, let me just put it this way. If my brain is really engaged and my script is really strong, like for example, sometimes when I video blog about something I've already blogged about it, and if I already blogged about it, then I have already have a script in my head, so my speech is more advanced and I'm more able to sound, I don't know, intelligent, adult-like, sophisticated. But this is the way that when you hear me speak like this, like the 3 videos I did tonight are me just sharing from the heart, kind of on the spot. And when I do that, I sound more childlike, and my thoughts, like I said with the stims or the blank outs, my thoughts start to run too fast, and it's like I know what I want to say, and I can't always say it because my thoughts just because I think in pictures first. So my thoughts are like, there's the picture will translate into a script, and if I make it on time, like if I've already blogged about it or it's a very left-brained academic subject, then I've got that language. If the subject is scientific with feelings and sharing from the heart, I'm a bit more rudimentary about how I describe it. I don't know how to explain that. And it seems like I'm almost like different personalities or something. It's like if I'm talking about something scientific and logical that I have retain a strong working memory about, then I'm like da 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 da. I'm like a nerd. I'm like super Sheldon, nerdy, left brain. And then other times, like I said, I'm more like, oh, da da da, that kind of thing. If you read my blogs, you'll notice that there is a discrepancy between the way that I speak. I seem well spoken enough, but between the way that I speak and the way that I write. The way that I write is a lot more sophisticated, and I use a lot more long words, and it sounds very intellectual, and it's different. It's pretty different to the way that I talk when I'm speaking from the heart. And I think for this reason, because as a kid, I used to, go, and I used to blank out a lot and things like that. I'm not so sure if you were to categorize things, because, everything's changing in terms of the autism spectrum. But if you were to categorize it, like I said in my original video, am I Asperger's or am I autistic? I actually almost feel like I'm more like beyond Asperger's, and maybe between Asperger's and like full-on autism. The way that I think is like that, and the fact that my thoughts go so fast that the language just flies out of my head sometimes, or the language that I'd like to use flies out of my head because I'm seeing it in a pattern, and it's like like pixels in my head. I don't know how to explain that. Pie graphs and pictures. So because that's how I really think, and then I have that childlikeness, I feel like, I mean, I know the term high functioning is kind of controversial too, but like I would consider my son Pearson to be like high function autism. And I when I speak with Pearson, I feel like I'm speaking my own native tongue. When I speak to him, it's like, oh yeah, do you want to go to the park? And I like will emphasize things and use a lot of tones, and that's kind of like how I think when it comes to feelings and communicating the feelings. So when I'm communicating feelings and concepts to him, or anything that has an emotion attached to it, um, I feel like I'm speaking my own language when I talk to him. So, and he's beyond Asperger's or whatever, and I don't know. For that reason, I feel sort of like I'm. I think I'm just totally autistic. I was always on the borderline with that. Like with school, I could drag myself through it, and if I tried really, really hard, I could get good grades most of the time. Sometimes I just couldn't get it, but there's a lot of people with like just maybe like like just Asperger's or Aspergian type of thing that can sort of sail through school, and I can do really well at subjects that I'm very interested in, and I had savants in certain areas, but I just had to use a lot more energy and time translating everything from my sort of autistic brain, and I wanted to do everything in a different way, and I was all up there in the sky and patterns and like as a kid I still stim, I actually have to stim. I actually have to get away, get my space, and I actually have to rock and stim and listen to music. And as a kid, I would actually like jump on my bed sometimes so much so that I gave myself whiplash. I would have to wring my hands when people weren't looking or flick my hands like this all the time. And you can see me doing that in videos when I was like 2.5 and 3. So, you can see me doing that like when I'm talking. Like for example, my 2-year birthday party, my parents are like, "How old are you, Natalie?" Natalie's my first name, by the way. I go by my middle name, Rose. I don't like Natalie. Bad memories. So I go by my middle name. But anyway, "How old are you, Natalie? How old are you?" And I was just like, just looking around and seeming like I wasn't there. I wasn't listening. And then all of a sudden I was like, "How old?" Like that. And I flicked my fingers. And then other times I would sort of fool people and turn to them and be like, "I would like a green balloon," or I would, my mom would say thank you for the present. And I would be like, "Thank you for the present." And I would say it in just that scripted way. And, I just knew how to sort of script in the right context. But you could see it was very subtle. Like you could see me looking around and being like, scripting and like grabbing something like this, and I would like smile and I would subtly squeeze it like this and then put it down, very quietly when nobody was really looking. So I think like I just think I'm a lot more autistic than like I might present or that people assumed. Like I don't know. I mean, like I said, I don't like to categorize, but I just almost think that I'm not really, if it's like here and here's the mildest, I'm more like toward the middle, like maybe before the middle, but a little bit before it, but more toward it, you know. Um, I actually think I'm full on, like a really close friend of mine in France, like we talk all the time, and she's a total Aspie, and she thinks she has an HFA. Well, I don't know. Again, we're categorizing here HFA, meaning my son and her son, HFA, high function autism. And she was like, I think you're HFA. I mean, like, I said, again, apologizing for all this. I don't even know what's politically correct anymore. I'm just trying to understand myself here. But aside from the political correctness, I hope people that don't like the terms forgive me for a moment here and try and look past it to see what I'm saying. I don't think I'm the mildest case. Like I think my femaleness has masked a lot of it, but I actually sort of think that I'm pretty well high function autism or whatever. I'm fairly like pretty autistic. Um, and that's just been overlooked because I'm a woman and all these other factors, and the fact that I have a savant ability to script really strongly. But again, it wavers. It wavers. If my mind is totally engaged in a special interest, and like I said, I've written about it before, and I have just recently read about it, and I'm remembering a lot of the language used. I'll use that language in the correct context, and I'll sound pretty sophisticated. But other times, like my speech, like the way I'm speaking now, the way I spoke tonight. I'm 28. I'll put an age on the way that I speak from the heart, and I would have to say it's at a teenage level, um, in some ways, and that's that discrepancy, the language discrepancy, or the idiosyncratic language. I'll even do really funny things, like I'll cover up not being able to think of a word or whatever with scripted, like scripted scripted responses. Like, I don't know how to explain that. For example, sometimes it sounds like English might be my second language. It sounds like maybe I have a little bit of an accent. I came from a different country originally, or something like that. I was raised by a French Canadian, and I certainly look like I could be from a different country other than North America. I've been told that I look kind of foreign before. So, like, for example, I was like, the other day, I was at the fashion clothing store, and I had this upturned accent because I was I had a mind blank about, I was at the store. I was trying to describe it, and I couldn't quite think of the right description, so I all of a sudden scripted describing it literally, the fashion clothing store, although that's not what you call it, kind of thing. I don't know quite how to explain that, but that was going back to thinking about my mom's French Canadianness, and how she was quite literal in a lot of her descriptions about things because of that being her second, English being her second language. So, yeah, I have idiosyncratic speech, and I have a language discrepancy between my writing and my emotional speech and my intellectual speech when it's scripted and when I've pre-memorized what I'm saying and my brain is engaged logically in it. So, and all of these things are totally part of the autistic brain and how it functions. So, yeah, I'm sure, I'm just really looking into it. I'm sure a lot of people with autism and or Asperger's diagnoses have these kind of traits and discrepancies as well. I'm not exactly unique to that whatsoever. This is just my manifestation of it, based on my personality, the way that my personality coped in my situations in life. The only thing that I really resent is that, especially before my diagnosis, I had a lot of people treat me like I was stupid, and it hurt. And I actually sort of got into a place where I ended up believing that I was stupid, that I was a ditz. And I even had an act, I had a sort of Phoebe from Friends act going on for a while in high school, which was actually quite charming, and it got me a lot of friends, but then I also doormatted myself with that same ditziness. I was like, oh yeah, blah, 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 and then I'd sort of, I don't know how to describe it, I had this honed act going on that was kind of boppy, and, but then I always felt like I was sort of, I don't know, I was sort of degrading myself a little bit because people didn't really understand my potential and what was really going on in my mind. And for that reason, I always felt like sad that people underestimated me, that I was actually capable. I was quite capable of academics. Like I said, I did find the way that they were taught and the way that it was all set up kind of hard to deal with, because I wanted to do things intensely, and I wanted to do math in an advanced way, and science and research, and it was, I don't know, I felt like it was almost like mundane, or that there was expectations to do things that were seemingly pointless, and then not enough sort of stimulation with things that were like more interesting, or like I felt inhibited by rules that you couldn't get too deeply into things and whatever. I don't know how to explain that, but Yeah, I'm kind of rambling here, but my main topic is the language differences that we have and language discrepancies, and how the language differences that we have can frame us into appearing to be something we're not, or maybe. What I'm saying is that rather than somebody who's a little slow and ditzy and naive and all this other stuff, which is what I was seen as, actually, I'm somebody who speaks really well for somebody who's relatively autistic. And yeah, and I feel like that I don't get, have not gotten any kind of recognition or credit for that, which is why I would be totally into being researched. I would be really interested in that. I think more research needs to be done on women. I've had a couple people ask me, sort of run it by me, and it it's been a loose question, but yeah, I would definitely be up for um, uh, offering myself and my story to any kinds of research. Autism research is particularly on women that is being done right now, because I think it's really important, and I don't want other girls to, younger girls, to be hurt like I have been, and like many of us Aspie women have been. And it would be really nice if we had some more knowledge and more awareness of the female presentations of autism. So, yeah, because I almost feel like our language could be, we're so good at sort of scripting and mirroring that we could script and mirror enough to pass for normal, but maybe like a ditzy normal. And I think it's such an injustice, because we might actually be much more intelligent than we're sort of presenting, with that childlikeness and immaturity in the emotional presentation. We could be a lot more intelligent. We could be total math geniuses, or science, or whatever. We could be a lot more intelligent than we sort of give off. But instead of being seen as somebody who's pretty autistic, but is able to pass for normal, and wow, isn't that pretty amazing? It's more, wow, she's such a ditz, and she's got all these problems, and it just kind of seems unfair and unjust. And I'd like to point out that somebody who was a real victim of that was Marilyn Monroe. I genuinely, wholeheartedly believe that the lady was autistic, and that she grew up in a rough situation in foster homes, and she had to survive by being charming and having this act about her. Turns out that act became Marilyn Monroe. And if you watch videos of her, like honestly, YouTube her after watching what I had to say here, and you will see what I'm talking about. The lady was autistic, and it's very beautiful, and for that reason, totally taken advantage of, because she was naive, even though she was no dummy. She was a very bright woman. I mean, if she wasn't bright, she wouldn't have made it as far as she did. But at the same time, she did get really used, and she ended up dead because of that sadness she had about all that, and that emptiness. So that's really sad. But anyway, and that's what I'm talking about. So blah, blah, blah. I'm rambling again.